one of the biggest mysteries in aviation history. The mystery has persisted for over a decade, yet it remains unsolved. 11 years after the disappearance, and nearly 7 years since the last search. The search for Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 has officially resumed. But why now? What prompted Malaysia to authorize a new search? Why is the company behind the search so confident that they accepted a no-fine, no-fee agreement? We will answer these questions in today's video. MH370, the search after 11 years. Let's rewind to March 8, 2014, when Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 took off from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, China. The aircraft used was a Boeing 777-200ER, a wide-body twin-engine jet manufactured by Boeing of the United States. At the time of departure, there were a total of 239 people on board, including 227 passengers and 12 crew members. MH370 took off like any normal flight. Once it reached cruising altitude and was flying steadily north, crossing Malaysian airspace and then entering the airspace of the East Sea of Vietnam. But then, unusual things started to happen. To this day, many details remain unclear about what occurred after that time. However, based on official reports and numerous independent studies, the most widely accepted hypothesis is that this was not a simple accident. It is highly probable that someone on board intentionally caused the aircraft to disappear and continue flying for several hours after civilian radar lost contact. But why do investigators lean towards this possibility? One of the first signs was when MH370 flew past Point Igari, the location marking the air traffic control boundary between Malaysia and Vietnam. The aircraft's transponder was suddenly switched off. This device plays a crucial role in helping air traffic control track and identify aircraft on secondary surveillance radar. Importantly, it did not shut down abruptly. In the final 37 seconds before the signal was completely lost, the transponder only ceased transmitting altitude data but remained otherwise functional, meaning it continued to transmit other information. The only way for that to occur is if someone in the cockpit intentionally turned the control knob to a mode that withholds altitude data, rather than switching it off entirely or to standby. This was a very specific and deliberate action. Immediately afterwards, the aircraft abruptly turned left, an unusual maneuver so extreme that Boeing experts confirmed the autopilot system would never permit such an action. To make such a turn, the pilot would have had to disengage the autopilot and take manual control. The location where this turn occurred was also remarkably strange. It happened at the precise moment the aircraft was handed over from Malaysian to Vietnamese air traffic control. And from that moment onwards, no one received any further communication from the flight crew. Because the turn occurred between the air traffic control regions of two nations, the process of detecting the missing aircraft was delayed. More notably, this turn also allowed the aircraft to evade Thailand's Air Defense Identification Zone, a sensitive area where any unidentified airborne object is closely tracked by military radar. This implies that if the aircraft had inadvertently entered the ADIZ, it would have been immediately detected. However, with a skillful flight path, the aircraft skillfully navigated along the outer edge of this zone without arousing any suspicion. Even if a radar technician had detected it, they could have easily assumed it was merely a commercial flight returning due to a technical issue, a relatively common occurrence. All of these details suggest that the person controlling this aircraft had an in-depth knowledge of the airspaces in the region and a thorough understanding of how the air traffic control system works. However, the detail that most clearly indicates this was a deliberate act, rather than a technical malfunction, lies in the aircraft's satellite communication system known as ACARS, which is an acronym for Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System. As the mysterious aircraft silently turned back towards Malaysia without any communication signals, ground stations continued to attempt to send routine periodic messages via ACARS, but strangely, there was no response. This indicates that the ACARS system on board the aircraft had become inactive. But here's the crucial point. Even if the system had simply lost signal or experienced a malfunction, it should still have sent an error signal to the satellite. Furthermore, if someone had deliberately logged out of ACARS from the cockpit, this action would have been recorded in the system logs. Yet, In the case of MH370, there was no indication of either scenario. The only way for ACARS to remain completely silent, as it did, would be to disable the aircraft's electrical power. But less than 30 minutes later, an incredible event occurred. The SATCOM system suddenly powered back on and automatically sent a login request. How could this be possible if the system had previously experienced a complete power outage? To understand what was happening, it's important to know that aircraft have multiple layers of redundant electrical power systems. The Boeing 777 is equipped with 2 generators on each engine, and any single one of these is capable of powering the ACARS system. According to experienced Boeing 777 pilots, completely disabling this system would require simultaneously shutting down all 4 engine-driven generators, an exceptionally drastic measure. Even in such a scenario, the aircraft has a final backup, the Auxiliary Power Unit, APU, on the 777. The APU is designed to start automatically in the event of a main generator failure. However, if someone intentionally started and then manually shut down the APU, it would not automatically restart. In that scenario, the final remaining source of electrical power would be the ram air turbine, RAT, which is only capable of supplying power to essential systems like flight controls and navigation, but not enough to maintain satellite communications or autopilot. In summary, completely disabling the AC power is an extremely complex task that could only be performed by someone with a thorough understanding of every facet of the Boeing 777's electrical systems. Furthermore, the subsequent automatic reconnection of the satellite system clearly indicates 2 things. Firstly, there was no major electrical failure, because if there had been, the system would not have been able to recover. Secondly, upon reconnecting, it did not contain any identifying information about the flight or the airline. This suggests that someone deliberately intervened from within the cockpit to make the system disappear. However, there was one thing that the person manipulating the ACARS system likely did not anticipate. That is that deleting the flight ID could not prevent the satellite system from continuing to connect. Even though the identification information was erased, the satellite still performed a routine handshake every hour to confirm that the connection between the ground and the aircraft remained active. These signals are known as handshakes. A total of 7 handshake signals were recorded after the aircraft disappeared from radar. Notably, the first and the last of these signals were related to logging back into the system. This indicates that the aircraft continued to fly for several more hours after all communication with air traffic control was lost. These seemingly simple signals actually hold a wealth of information. From the precise timing of each handshake, investigators have been able to estimate the aircraft's final trajectory. All of this, including the handshakes and the inferences drawn from the satellite data, is not new information. So, what is causing the search for MH370 to become active again at this point? The answer depends on whom you ask. Some optimistic sources suggest that today's advanced search technology can accomplish what was considered an impossible mission a decade ago. However, there are also skeptics who believe that finding anything new regarding MH370 is merely a hopeful aspiration rather than a realistic prospect. The initial search for MH370 commenced shortly after the aircraft disappeared and spanned nearly 3 years. However, in January 2017, following thousands of hours of deep-sea exploration and millions of dollars expended on the operation, the official search was despairingly concluded. The only findings were 2 small pieces of debris confirmed to be from the exterior of the aircraft. These were not discovered on the ocean floor, but were washed ashore. In the subsequent years, approximately 30 other pieces of debris, also suspected to be from MH370, continued to be found scattered across the coasts of Africa, Madagascar, and regions of the Western Indian Ocean. However, none of these fragments have provided a comprehensive understanding of the events that unfolded inside the cockpit on the night of the incident. And now, the search has been recommenced by the company Ocean Infinity. However, this is not actually their first involvement. Ocean Infinity previously conducted a search operation for MH370 that spanned from January to June 2018. Although they did not locate anything during that effort, they demonstrated significant potential in the field of high-tech deep-sea exploration. This company possesses a fleet of specialized vessels equipped with robots and remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, that act like electronic eyes, capable of diving thousands of meters to meticulously scan every square meter of the seabed with exceptional accuracy. By utilizing 4 autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, concurrently, Ocean Infinity's distinguishing factor is speed. Thanks to their team of underwater robots working in parallel, they assert that they can survey a vast area in an exceptionally short time frame, a feat that previous conventional operations would require months to accomplish. And this time, they are confident that everything is in place to achieve what the entire world has been anticipating for more than a decade. During their 2018 search for MH370, Ocean Infinity initially designated a 25,000 square kilometer area for survey, but they actually scanned over 112,000 square kilometers. They accomplished this in just 3 months, whereas previous search operations took up to 2.5 years to achieve comparable coverage. Since then, Ocean Infinity has upgraded its fleet, expanded its operational capacity, and modernized its equipment. This provides a compelling rationale for the renewed pursuit of the 21st century's most enigmatic missing aircraft. The new contract between Ocean Infinity and the Malaysian government, the official authority responsible for the investigation, is valid for 18 months, a notably substantial time frame, particularly when entrusted to a company that has already demonstrated its capability to search a wider area, more rapidly, and at greater depths than any previous efforts. But here's the most extraordinary aspect. If they do not locate the aircraft wreckage, Ocean Infinity will receive no payment whatsoever under a no-find, no-fee arrangement. Their reward for finding the wreckage is $70 million. Conversely, if they are unsuccessful, they will receive no compensation and will bear the entire operational costs of their fleet for the full 18-month contract period. Such an enormous gamble with such high stakes surely indicates that Ocean Infinity believes they possess something that no one else has had before. And to understand what that might be, we need to revisit the initial clues, particularly the final 7 handshake signals that MH370 transmitted to the satellite after it vanished from radar. You may have seen these signals depicted as 7 concentric arcs on a map, resembling ripples spreading from an unseen epicenter in the ocean. But what is their significance? Each handshake is similar to a basic GPS signal. Malaysia Airlines utilized the Inmarsat satellite for transmitting ACAR's data and for communication with the aircraft. Consequently, we know the precise moment the satellite transmitted its signal, as well as the duration it took for the aircraft to respond. This response time was not constant. It varied depending on the actual distance between the aircraft and the satellite at that specific moment, and this discrepancy is known as the burst timing offset, BTO. Thanks to that minute time deviation, investigators were able to plot the final trajectory of MH370, using calculations and logical deduction. To better grasp this concept, consider your phone when using GPS navigation. It acquires signals from at least 3 satellites, or potentially more. Each satellite establishes a circle around your position based on the distance, and your precise location is determined by the intersection of these circles. In the case of MH370, the communication between the aircraft and the Inmarsat satellite operated on a similar principle, albeit utilizing a single satellite. Each time a handshake occurred, the system was able to determine that the aircraft was located somewhere along a vast circle, based on the signal response delay. More specifically, this is the BTO parameter, which measures the round-trip time of the signal between the satellite and the aircraft. And because the speed of radio waves is constant, measuring this time is sufficient to deduce the distance. This circle was immense, as the aircraft could have been anywhere along its circumference. However, investigators were able to rule out half of each circle because they knew the aircraft was a Boeing 777-200ER with finite speed, flight envelope, and operational range. Had MH370 flown north, it would have traversed numerous regions with military radar installations, yet no system registered its passage. Consequently, the theory of a southward flight path became far more credible, which is why the initial search efforts concentrated in the Indian Ocean, along the final arc. But there's more. Investigators also uncovered another crucial piece of information from the handshake data, the burst frequency offset, BFO, which represents the deviation in the transmitted signal's frequency. This parameter indicates how the aircraft was moving relative to the satellite by analyzing the subtle shifts in frequency. We can visualize this using the analogy of an ambulance siren. As the ambulance approaches, the siren's pitch sounds higher, and as it passes and moves away, the pitch drops. This phenomenon is known as the Doppler effect. This same effect occurs with radio waves in the case of MH370. Since the satellite was positioned in space, the BFO data indicates whether the aircraft was flying towards or away from the satellite, or if it was ascending or descending at that particular moment. This information was crucial in meticulously analyzing the potential final movements of the aircraft. Previously, two highly experienced pilots, Captain Patrick Blely and Jean-Luc Marchand, conducted a very significant study. Specifically, they delved deeply into the electronic systems of the Boeing 777 and the operational procedures of Malaysia Airlines in order to leverage every remaining piece of data. Their work was exceptionally detailed and significantly clarified the potential flight paths based on the 7 handshake signals. However, there is a second, truly distinctive study conducted by Richard Godfrey, an aerospace electronic systems engineer who has dedicated years to researching something seemingly unrelated, WSPR, which is an acronym for Weak Signal Propagation Reporter. This is a system founded by Joseph Hooton Taylor Jr., an astrophysicist and amateur radio enthusiast. WSPR was developed to enable radio enthusiasts to test how radio signals propagate on various frequencies over vast distances. Interestingly, if a large object, such as a massive aircraft, passes through the transmission path between two WSPR stations, the signal will experience a brief, subtle disturbance or distortion. Moreover, all these signals are logged in a global, publicly accessible database. This might sound like radar, right? In fact, modern passive radar systems operate on a similar principle, utilizing existing radio waves rather than emitting active signals. Richard Godfrey is taking this concept even further. He developed sophisticated algorithms to filter and analyze WSPR data, allowing him to trace the aircraft's flight path as if using a clandestine radar system. Even more remarkably, WSPR data generates a new signal approximately every 2 minutes. This means that throughout MH370's hours-long journey, any object disrupting the signal paths would very likely have left subtle, yet potentially detectable, traces in the data unnoticed at the time. Most traditional models, including those by the experienced pilots Captain Patrick Blely and Jean-Luc Marchand, have assumed that MH370 flew south in a straight trajectory. This is considered a logical strategy, as minimizing course deviations would make the aircraft less likely to be detected by military or civilian radar. However, Godfrey's analysis suggests otherwise. According to his WSPR analysis, the aircraft did proceed south, but not in a perfectly straight line. Instead, its flight path included gentle curves, potentially to evade heavily trafficked air corridors. This further bolsters the theory that whoever was in control intended to remain concealed until the very end, possibly even as fuel was nearing depletion. The WSPR data also indicates that the aircraft may have flown in a figure-8 pattern for a brief period, a puzzling, deliberate maneuver, a sign of desperation, or the final indication of an aircraft critically low on fuel with nothing to lose. Some time ago, engineer Richard Godfrey also published a new study. In this study, he compared the final landing location derived from WSPR data collected by his team with 2 data points recovered from the home computer of Captain Zahari, the pilot of MH370. Remarkably, one of the flight simulations that Captain Zahari had previously conducted on his home flight simulator software followed a flight path that intersected directly with the area where Godfrey's WSPR analysis indicates MH370 flew in a figure-8 pattern. If this correlation holds true, it is no mere coincidence, but rather a powerful reinforcement of WSPR's validity, offering yet another compelling reason to believe that we are closer than ever to uncovering the truth. In February of this year, despite ongoing procedures, Ocean Infinity began deploying their equipment on February 26th, marking the official recommencement of the search for MH370. On the map, the orange and red areas indicate previously searched zones. White borders delineate the new search area being surveyed by Ocean Infinity. This encompasses 2 rectangular regions situated on either side of the 7th arc, which represents the last known point from the satellite data. Of these, the southern rectangle almost perfectly aligns with the search area proposed by Captain Blely and Marchand, and further to the north, a white, jagged-edged area perfectly aligns with Godfrey's model. All of these search zones have been approved by the Malaysian government. With today's advanced technology, we have reason to be hopeful that flight MH370 will be found. This search is not driven by mere curiosity, but by the pursuit of truth. Moreover, the 239 individuals who were aboard that flight, and their hundreds of families who have endured an agonizing wait for the past 11 years, deserve closure.